My name is Travis, Travis Knipple. I'm from the United States, and for the past 10 years, I've been a missionary in the Caribbean on the island, well, half of the island of Hispaniola. So Haiti, which is also the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, or at least that's the last statistic I read. And God called me there in 2010 after a horrific earthquake. So first I wanted to show you that this is just our family. That's my daughter Mara is in my arms and Aiden is in Jamie's arms. They're home with their grandparents today. I think, well, Timo at least knows them. Some of the church may have heard of the names of Pertti and Haiti Soderlund. I never pronounce it correctly, but they've served in Uganda and Kenya for the past, 60 years? JB's grandfather was also a missionary. So she grew up in this missions family. And so, yeah, the kids are staying with her parents this morning over in Hakuanila. Did I still have other pictures too? I will, as I look at them. So here is Haiti. It shares the island with the Dominican Republic. It's in the Caribbean. So some of its neighbors, if you don't know where it is, Jamaica, as I've met our Jamaican sister back here, and Cuba, Puerto Rico are all neighbors to Haiti. And then I just wanted to share this with you because when God called me to Haiti in 2010, basically all he told me was to go and help. And that's all the information I had. So my first year there, I bought this truck. We were able to buy this truck with our ministry and ship it down, and all my tools were in the truck, and I just jumped from ministry to ministry as a homeless person, going to different ministries and helping them on whatever projects we could. So some of the projects were solar panels. My background was in electrical engineering, and electricity is hard to come by, but we have lots of sun. So that's one of our primary areas of ministry, is to help other missionaries by providing them with electricity. As you can imagine, there's a lot of reasons that that's beneficial, including just making life easier, but also, just refrigeration and fans and everything. So God has allowed us to bless other missionaries and take some of the stress and burden off of them and allow them to do what he has called them to better. So there's another picture of solar panels. If you can't tell, we got better as the years went on. The first picture was one of our first jobs, and this one was more recent. So we learned how to do it prettier. Some of the other projects we've done, this was building a school. I ended up on a team that hang out on roofs and building schools. And then I think I might have had one other picture of a project. No, just me and my truck, an old one. I'll explain a little more later, but I had the picture of me in the truck and of me and Jamie, because that is one of the greatest pieces of my testimony, is that somehow God brought me her, and that was such an amazing blessing. And then, we've served as also in a church capacity, that we were worship leaders and leaders of a missionary church in Haiti as well. Once we got settled into a place, the second area of ministry that God opened up to me was to build a workshop. And this workshop started as a place to house tools and be our home base of operations. But it also turned into a place that I could teach young men the different skills that I knew. Anything that I know how to do, I want to pass on to others. And my goal from the start was to work myself out of a job. And honestly, we've actually kind of gotten to that point that my crew is still working even when I'm not there. And it's probably time for us to hand more autonomy over to them and just let them take care of things from now on. I think the next picture, this is my crew. They're a lively bunch. I met them because they wanted to learn solar power and welding, and I had tools and skills. But they are my family. As you can see, they love our family too. This is our kids. The bottom right picture, the right pictures were at my daughter's birthday party, and they are proud uncles to the two little white kids that are hanging out with them. They love our family so much. And this picture, you'll hear me talk about a bit more today. We left Haiti in February. I left in an air ambulance. This was the car that we were in. We had a bad car accident. And by the grace of God, I'm here today. That car was pretty beat up. The man standing in front was a blessing that he was a good Samaritan at a time when I desperately needed one. He pulled me out of the car and held his own shirt on my bleeding until we got to the hospital. Yeah, that was in February and kind of kicked off the craziest year of my life, and I don't know that anything will ever be able to top this year for craziness. I hope not, because it's been a doozy. But I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. I had a total of 6 surgeries, and I was not looking like myself. They kind of resculpted my face with metal. My cheekbones are metal these days, and this was one of the things that got me through it. As I was in the hospital, so many people were praying for us that my brother just felt the need to start shoving push pins into a map of all the different places that people said they were praying for us. It was such a touching thing, and you could feel the power of God in my life in that time. That there was people, it's kind of hard to see from here, but the United States is kind of covered, but there's a big chunk up in Europe, especially in Finland, and there's a big chunk in Africa. And then, I think we hit all the continents, but it was crazy how God's people came together to support us in that time. And if there was ever a feeling of being a part of God's family, that was the overwhelming thing that I got, was knowing that God's family was all around us, all around the world, and was lifting us up. And he was taking care of me and our whole family at that time. So all of that said, I think that was all the pictures. It probably just cycled through. It might have cycled through to a family picture again, but if not, I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of how we got here. Our ministry has been 10 years strong, and God called us, and I have loved the ministry we're doing, but this year, God really changed things up. Like I said, the accident in February kicked off a whirlwind of activities. We ended up in the United States for 5 months. By that point, Jamie's visa status in the United States had expired because she's a Finnish citizen, and Haiti wasn't actually safe for us to go back to yet. So since she's a Finn, we came to Finland. And we've been here for 3 months, and we're working on getting her residency in the United States, but that's going to take at least another 2 months. So we're still here until God opens another door for us. It's amazing what God has done in our lives. But to finally get into the proper sermon that I was working on. This year, one of the songs that has played in through my mind over and over is the song we just sang. Great is thy faithfulness. Because laying in a hospital bed, it was playing through my mind. Great is his faithfulness. At that time, obviously, there was nothing I could do. I was at the mercy of the doctors in the hospital and God. And it was incredible to see his faithfulness in allowing me to recover faster than any of the doctors or staff thought I should. That was his hand. So this song kept playing through my mind, Great is Thy Faithfulness. And I remember actually, it was, I think, the first song I sang when I was capable of singing again. Because I had a breathing tube in my neck, trach, and my jaws were wired shut. So there wasn't a whole lot of singing to be done, but it was the first song that I struggled out. So, but the big thing that hit me this year was the last verse. Pardon for sin and a peace that endures. Thine own dear presence to have and to guide. Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. Blessings all mine with 10,000 besides. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand has provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. It just blew me away. How many times had I sung this song? And that last verse painted the most clear, beautiful picture of what being a Christian really means. If I had to distill why I'm a Christian down to a few thoughts, this is it. This is what Jesus has done for us. So it really hit me this year. But before I go on, I just want to get into everything I speak to you today, everything I've shared about our ministry in Haiti, even our delightful welcome from Pastor Emmanuel, correct, and Brother Timo, that they're thankful, they're so gracious in welcoming us here. But I want to start off by saying, I'm nothing. This year, and even the year before, 2019, was full of political instability in Haiti, and protests, and crime was on the rise, and life was exceedingly difficult. And at this point, 2 years from the last 2 years have left me physically broken, mentally exhausted, and spiritually weary. There is nothing that I can do. There is nothing. I am grumpy, I am angry, I am depressed more often than I care to admit. There was a time I was known for being joyful and gracious, quick with the jokes, and this year I haven't been. I've been full of anxiety and doubt. So when the chance came to speak, I'm like, what can I share about? What can I bring as an encouragement? And the encouragement is that no matter how you are feeling personally, no matter how I am feeling personally, I feel so low, but God is faithful. And He carries us through everything that we encounter. Political protests, He's got it. Injuries, health issues, a hospitalization, He's got it. Financial struggles, He's got it. He is faithful in all areas of our lives. Our work, our family, our health, our future, our homes. He is faithful. And one of the things that I learned early on in my life, in my spiritual life, was that everything belongs to Him. So it is easy to trust in Him once we can wrap our minds around that. He is faithful because it's all His anyhow. My life belongs to Him. So of course He'll take care of it. Everything in this world belongs to Him. So a scripture I wanted to share with you today, we don't have it on the screen because I didn't get it to them in time, so that's on me. But it's Romans 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer yourselves as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not be conformed any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Paul urges us to sacrifice everything. When he says present your bodies, he's not just talking about our physical bodies. He's talking about all of us. Everything we have, everything we own, everything we desire, everything we plan, give it over to him. And let him transform us. And you know what? He can transform us in such a way that he does give us our desires, even though we didn't know we had them. 10 years ago, my desire never would have been to be in Haiti 10 years down the line. My desire wasn't to marry a Finn. I hadn't even thought about it. I was in Pennsylvania. Where was I even going to meet a Finnish girl? And then I moved to Haiti. Those weren't my desires. Following God allowed him to transform my heart and give me what I desired, even when I didn't know that it was my desire. And it has been an amazing journey. I want to share with you a few of the things God did call me to sacrifice along the way, though, because I think that they are probably some common things. One of in the Amplified version of the Bible, the Romans 12 passage, in verse 2, it says, "Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world." And it adds, "any longer with its superficial values and customs." Do not be conformed to this world's superficial values and customs, but be transformed and progressively changed as you mature spiritually by the renewing of your mind. And it was just an interesting realization that, we are progressively changed as God calls us. As we mature in him, he calls us to sacrifice different pieces of our lives for his glory. And there's a great reward in it. For me, it started as a teenager after I accepted Christ. I realized that I kind of had to sacrifice my self-image, who I thought I wanted to be in the world's eyes. And in some cases, it meant being singled out or being considered the strange person by being the Christian. In my high school, there was probably only about 5 of us that were really living for Christ out of 1,000 kids. And it meant that sometimes I was picked on. Sometimes I was set apart. And that was the sacrifice as a teenager. In my 20s, I graduated college and I got a job as an engineer. And I felt God calling me to get more involved in ministry. It was funny, my boss made kind of gave me a bad evaluation at work, and he said, "I think if you could just not show up to work and go work with the youth group at the church full time, that you would do that." And he meant it to be a criticism, and I stopped and thought about it that day and went, he's right. I think that's what God called me to do, to get into ministry full time. But that was going to be a big step. So instead, I quit my engineering job. I moved home where my brother had a ministry. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be involved in his ministry. This will be my thing. But I'm still going to get a job as an engineer because that provides for my finances. That provides for me to support myself. And by the time I got home, God slammed the door on that and sent me to a few interviews that should have been easy jobs. Should have been a guaranteed interview. And I walked away without a job and went, okay, God, what are you doing? And he said, no, I want you in ministry full time. it hurt. But he called me to sacrifice my finances. Since that time in 2008, it's been 12 years, and I've never made enough money to be above the U.S. government's poverty line. I've actually never had a steady income with a guaranteed paycheck. Even our ministry in Haiti, it's if there's money, our salary is the last thing taken out. All the other ministry expenses go first, and if there's money left over to take a salary, then we do it. But God called us to sacrifice, to make the sacrifice of trusting our finances in his hands. The crazy part is that when I looked back at my taxes the one year, I had worked 1 year as an engineer and made a salary of $45,000. The next year, I worked odd jobs, and my salary for the total year was $4,500. And the following year, God had called me to Haiti, and when I filed my taxes, my income for the year was $450. And my quality of life never changed. It was crazy. I still had food. I still had a place to live. Well, in Haiti, I was kind of jumping around, but that was by choice. But he took care of me. I never would have chosen that method of learning about his faithfulness. But now that I've gone through it, I can say without a doubt, he is bigger than a paycheck. He is bigger than finances. He can control it, and he can, the one that Jesus says in Matthew, God takes care of the birds in the air and makes sure they have food and dresses the flowers in the field. He takes care of me. And he proved it and has continued to prove it for over a decade. It was a hard sacrifice to trust God with my money. But I can stand before you and say, he can handle whatever financial situations you go through. If you trust him, he will take care of you. Sometimes trusting him means to let go of our own security in it, though. I don't think I could have learned that lesson if I still had an engineer's salary. I wish I could. It would have been easier. But God taught me the lesson, and I want to share it with you because I think that's one of the beauties of testimony is maybe we can share our stories and encourage others so that they don't have to go through the hard part to learn the lesson out of it. But yeah, God proved to me that he can take care of finances. And then he called me to Haiti 2 years after I'd gone into full-time ministry. And I was broke. I had no money. I couldn't buy a plane ticket to get there. But I said, God, I feel you calling me, so if you provide, I'll go. And if you continue to provide, I'll stay there. I thought that was going to be like a year or two commitment in 2010. Now it's 10 years in. Apparently he had bigger plans than I did. And it has been, he has provided every step of the way. You know, I never actually stopped to look at it, but realized that somehow I went from the first 2 years of being single and homeless in Haiti. I got married, and God continued to provide. We had 2 kids along the way, and God continued to provide. But I don't even know where more money came from. Like obviously every person you add is more expenses. Building the workshop was more expenses. I don't know how it happened, but God continued to provide for us. And through the years, it was not just finances. So I want to share one other piece for you of how God provided. It's a little out of order of how I was trying to do things with the song, but I'm fine with it. Because I just got on this kick of we serve a God who takes care of us and provides for us. You know, that picture I showed you of me standing in front of the truck, I was in Haiti for 2 years. And like I said, I was homeless. I just kind of traveled around. I had very little income. there was, at one time, I left my truck and tools and every possession I had in Haiti, flew back to the States. And as I left, I had to park my truck in another missionary's lot and say, I don't know when I'm coming back because I can't afford it. So keep it for me until I get back. And when it was time, God provided money, and I got back to Haiti and got back to ministry. There were meager times, but God taught us. He used finances as a guidance tool at times. If we didn't have money, then apparently we weren't supposed to do what I thought we were supposed to do because we couldn't afford it. But if God has all the resources in the world, then he can provide for what he wants done. And it ended up being a very important tool for us to realize that God will provide. And there were times that he provided more abundantly than we thought we needed. And then would run into expenses that we didn't know we were going to encounter. It's like, oh, that's what you're doing. This year was a great example. After the accident, quite a few people donated to our ministry because they understood that there would be medical expenses and things like that as a result of all the hospitalization. And yeah, the United States is crazy. I don't recommend our medical system, but things worked out for us. You know, the insurance that we had actually covered what it was supposed to. And at the end of the day, I'm looking at our bank accounts and going, man, we had so many donations. There's actually more money than I've ever seen in this account. It's like we had more than a year's worth of funding come in like a week. I'm like, okay, God, thank you. I don't know what you're up to, but, you know, but at the time I saw that, it was back in probably April that I noticed it. Didn't know at that point that we were going to spend 5 months in the United States, and then now it's looking like 5 months in Finland. And in the US, I couldn't work because I wasn't physically capable, and here I'm not allowed to work. So it's a good thing that God provided in February for the next 10 months all at that point, because otherwise we wouldn't have been able to survive. So it was another beautiful example of how God provided. Yeah. But in a non-financial piece that I want to share with you, it's my favorite story of how God provided is when I was in Haiti, 2 years living by myself, traveling around with the truck. I'm 27 years old, and for the first time in my life, I start thinking about a family. And I'm like, God, you know, when I was at a Christian college or working as an engineer, these would have been good times for me to find a wife because I had a good income and a good prospect for the future. No, now I'm thinking about a wife when I'm homeless in a third world country and have no income. Even better, I think I got a haircut about once a year those days. And most of my clothes had holes or stains because I just wore my work clothes all the time. And I would go through, and at the airports, I would always get stopped for the random security checks because I looked pretty terrible. But that was the time that finally it was stirring in my mind, God, I could really use a helper. I could really use someone alongside of me. But how am I going to convince anyone to marry this guy? And the answer was I wasn't. I ended up in an arranged marriage, I say. Jamie said that before too. God arranged our marriage. And if you want evidence of it, here I would live in Haiti for 3 months at a time. I would go back to the States for a month, and then I'd go back to Haiti for 3 months in those days. And I came home from Haiti, spent a month in the States, and at my brother's church during prayer time, I find out that there's this girl there who's in a month is going back to Uganda, so we should pray for her as she goes back to Uganda. And I walk back and I meet her, and I'm like, hey, I have no idea where God's going to call me next. So I want a friend in Uganda. So I just met her to make a friend and make sure that if God ever called me to Africa, I knew someone there. And we hit it off as friends, as people that God had worked deeply in our lives and sculpted us and changed us. And he was our everything. So we spent a month hanging out, and I went back to Haiti, and she felt called to Africa, back home with her parents. And we kept in touch, but knew that God was calling us our separate ways. And then God showed her that her mission in Africa had finished up and gave me a peace. And I flew over to Africa and proposed to her on day 4 of a month-long trip. Probably not the wisest thing if she would have said no. That would have been really awkward for the rest of the month. But thankfully, God had given me peace and gave her the same peace. He provided me with a wife through extraordinary means in extremely difficult circumstances. And I have been so blessed to have her by my side through all the incredible journey that God has brought us through. And so that's just another piece of sharing that it's not finances alone. God can take care of every part of our lives. He's taking care of giving us a place to live in this year. We couldn't go back to Haiti where our home is. We didn't get deported, but we ran out of time to live in the U.S. We would have been deported if we stuck around. And then we came to Finland, and even here we've overrun our 3 months, so I had to apply for residency. All things that God knew and he took care of ahead of time. He provided a place for us to live. He provided a wife for me. Trust that he can provide for all of your needs. As the chorus says, great is thy faithfulness. All I have needed, your hand has provided. So if you're struggling today, questioning how God will take care of things, know that he is faithful in all areas of our life. I kind of skipped over my main point, but that was what I felt God telling me right now. One other thing that I want to share with you, the last point I have for you today, because I've hit on how he is faithful in all situations as far as providing for us. But I also want to touch on how he is faithful to be with us. That car accident, that broken truck I showed you, it left me with over a dozen fractures in my face, on my jaw, my cheekbones, my eye sockets. My face was a mess. 4 fractures down my spine, a broken wrist, and a skull fracture. I have no recollection of the actual accident. The one thing that I remember from the day of the accident, I couldn't even open my eyes. Apparently, I became alert in the back of the ambulance that I was moving my hand, and so someone started talking to me. So all I have is an audio clip from that day stuck in my head. And it was a close friend of mine, another missionary, saying, Travis, it's Pastor Lex. It's okay, we've got you. In hindsight, I should have been terrified. The world was black. I couldn't open my eyes. Based on my injuries, I probably couldn't move at that point. But all I remember is peace. An overwhelming peace. A peace that passes all understanding. Even in the next week, I only have bits and pieces of awareness. But I knew that I was going in and out of surgeries, and there was a lot of stuff happening to me. I had serious injuries. I never had fear. I had peace. And in that list out of the second verse of the song, pardon for sin, peace that endureth, I guess I would have overlooked peace at other times in my life. But to see how God can provide peace in the storm, man, that was a whole new picture to me. That level of peace in the midst of an upheaval. For my family, Jamie had one of my guys show up and say Travis was in an accident, and basically she just had to pack up a little backpack, and her and the kids left our home on really short notice with almost nothing, and ended up flying with me to the U.S. There was all kinds of testimonies of how God worked out all the details, so many details, thousands of things. They all combine to give us a peace that is beyond understanding. It's so weird to look back, and I appreciate that lesson enough that I'm not sad I was in the accident. I can't say I would choose to be in a car accident again, because I don't think I would choose that. But if that's what it takes to experience that peace, I'm glad to have had the accident. Because I know if God can walk with me through that time, there is nothing that he won't walk with me through. He is my Father. This past week, my daughter got injured and she was bleeding from her head. Nothing serious. Heads just bleed a lot when you hit them. But as she was hurt, I just held her and tried to comfort her. And realized how much more God just did that to me. That he held me close. And I never had any fear. It's not that I had an assurance that I wouldn't die. It's that dying didn't scare me. I had peace. I had peace knowing that if I died, I would be with God. If I died, God would take care of my wife and kids. If I lived, if I was paralyzed, God would take care of us. If there were anything that happened, God was with us, and there was nothing to fear. And it was an incredible experience. And it's been a hard, I love that I learned that lesson, but 2020 has really tried to test me on it. That the peace of knowing that God is in control and has us. I went into the hospital on February 22nd. By the time that I was alert and finally back connected to the outside world 3 weeks later, in February, coronavirus wasn't even a thing to anybody was worried about. 3 weeks later, Italy was shut down. So I kind of got back onto the internet and was like, whoa, what just happened? Was blown away by this disease that popped up and has thrown everything off course for the world. But it didn't surprise God. It has shaken people from comfort. It has shaken people from stability. It has messed up jobs. It's messed up economies. It's messed up travel. But God is not surprised, and he's ready to walk with all of us through whatever challenges come. So that's the encouragement I want to leave you with today. Whatever is going on in your life, God will walk with you through it. He can give you peace. It is his Holy Spirit that can pour out peace on you. If you don't know him, then I encourage you to cry out to God as your Father. come talk to me. Me, Emmanuel, Timo, Jamie, I'm sure there's other people that would be glad to tell you what it is to be a child of God. If you don't know God as your Father, if you don't know that feeling, talk to us. We will pray with you and help you understand how to become a child of God. Because there is no greater thing in this life. And it's also the reason, as Pastor Emmanuel was talking about, it's also the reason that we send people out as missionaries, whether it's within Finland or all over the world, so that people would know the love of God. That it wouldn't just be something personal for us, that we would share. And I would encourage you on an individual basis to share your testimonies with people, that they would know God's love and grace and faithfulness. That's the challenge for you today. Look back at your life and see where God has been faithful to you, and share that with others. And in your prayer time, ask God what he would have you do next. And be willing to take that jump, because he will take care of everything. He might put you in uncomfortable situations, in unpleasant situations, but he will be with you every step of the way and give you peace and strength. Can we pray together? Father, you are amazing, and you are faithful beyond what we can comprehend. Lord, you have expressed your love for us in so many ways. You sent your Son to die on a cross for sinners like us, for weak, broken, desperate people. And you have promised to give your Spirit to us, to strengthen us and to walk with us. Thank you, Lord. Show us today your faithfulness, and guide us, Father, every step of the way. That in everything we say, everything we do, everything we have, everything we plan for the future, we would honor you. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.